Hey everyone, and welcome to the channel. Let's go ahead and wrap up my reading and some other stuff from the month of October, and we'll see if my horror reads for the month were a success or not. But first, let's go ahead and start with the first book I finished, and a new favorite for me. This is The Forgetting Moon, book one of the Five Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee. I ended up giving this a 4-star rating, and this is my favorite fantasy book that I have read so far this year. It is not my favorite book of the year. It is close, but it is definitely my favorite fantasy one. There's only a couple books that I'm putting above it right now, but this is book one of that trilogy, like I mentioned, and there were just so many elements in this story that worked so well for me. The grittiness of it, how dark it was, some of the fantastical elements, and a lot of the world building was just top notch for me. I could definitely see how some people would find it a little bit exposition heavy and maybe not be super in love with the characters, because there's a wide variety of them, and I think some you'll like more than others. But for me, this is one of those books that just really worked super well for me, and I really don't have anything negative to say about it. If I have anything negative to say about it, it is basically me making myself find something that I think people might have issues with, not necessarily something that I myself have issues with. So for me, this is just one of the best books that I've read this year. Super happy that I finally got around to reading it, and I cannot wait to read The Blackest Heart. I'm not 100% sure when I'm going to get to that, but hopefully sometime soon, because like I said, The Forgetting Moon was a revelation for me. I had such a great time reading it, and if you are into like the grimdark genre, I think this is a must read for most of you. And then the next three things we're going to talk about are my horror reads for the month of October. Like most people, I do try to sprinkle in a little extra horror in the month of October just for Halloween and all of that fun stuff. So the first one I read was actually a short story. It is called The Willows by Algernon Blackwood, and I had a pretty good time with this one. I kind of struggle with shorter works a lot of times. I just feel like I can't get that attachment very often of like pushing myself to that next level of like really engaging with it. I feel like a lot of times, a lot of the things that I like take time to really get established and everything. But as somebody who has spent a decent amount of time in the woods and out in nature and had that feeling of like, is there something out there watching me? All of these things, just being spooked in the woods, The Willows does a fantastic job of capturing a lot of those elements and those feelings of just like something feeling off when you're out basically alone in the middle of nowhere. And so I had a really good time with it. It was very short, like I said, so it's not like a huge commitment. It is something I would recommend to a lot of people. I will say it is a little bit of an older work, so it did take me a little bit of a adjustment to get used to the writing itself, but it's also a style of writing that I actually really like, but it just takes me that little bit to make that adjustment to the way it is written. But yeah, once again, good time, not too long, but it was a good way to start some of my horror reads. And unfortunately, after that, I read The Deep, and this is by Nick Cutter. This was kind of my headline horror book, and unfortunately, it didn't work for me. I read The Troop by Nick Cutter last year, and that one was really good. I had a great time with that one. I think I ended up having that in my top 10 of the year and everything, so I was very optimistic going into this book. And it, like I said, it just didn't work for me. I had a lot of problems with the characters. I had a lot of problems with the plot, and I think this story has a great premise. I thought it was going to be really good, and the first like third of this book, I was really all in. I was hooked. It was working really well for me. And it's just one of those things that as the story progressed and the big reveals and the mysteries start to come more to the forefront, it didn't work for me. If you are somebody who likes some of that ambiguity and some weirdness in your books, I think this is going to be something that you will like, because there's a lot of that going on in here. But yeah, unfortunately, the story as a whole didn't work. Now, there are definitely some good elements that I enjoyed, especially from a horror standpoint. The claustrophobia and like the lack of light. Obviously, if you don't know, this story is taking place at the bottom of the Mariana Trench in the Challenger Deep, and so the lack of light and that claustrophobic feeling was done super well. And I still like Nick Cutter as a writer. I like his actual like writing, like the actual prose and how he describes things. I think that is all very well done technically, and so I will definitely continue reading some of his stuff. I forget what the next book from him that's pretty popular. I think he actually might be having a new book coming out soon, so maybe I'll go ahead and pick that up at the time. But yeah, unfortunately for me, this one ended up being a 2-star. Didn't really like it, and definitely put a little bit of a damper on some of the horror reads. I was really hopeful for this one. So, but after that, I moved on to my last horror read, and this is kind of a mixture of horror. This one definitely was not supposed to be as strictly a horror novel. It is a post-apocalyptic book that has to deal with the first contact of what we're assuming is aliens, and that is All the Fiends of Hell by Adam Neville. So I ended up giving this one a 4-star rating, so I really did have a good time with this one. Like I said, I think the plot in this one is really good. This is definitely a story where I was very frustrated by some of the characters. I don't know if there's a single likable character basically in this entire book, and that I don't always need to like my characters. I want to make that clear, especially especially, you know, I did end up really liking this book, but sometimes this book had me like wanting to bang my head against the wall with just some of the choices and the way some of the characters acted over and over again. This is one of those stories that I think has a really good mystery, and it has that kind of Walking Dead feel. I'm trying to think of like another good, Last of Us would maybe be another one, though zombies are not the problem here. But it does kind of have that like that creeping dread where you need to keep moving, keep getting away, keep progressing, and get somewhere safe. And so that element here was really well done. I think the mystery of it all ends up playing a pretty big part in this story. I think the not knowing is something that really drives a lot of it, and the whole time you're just kind of questioning what's going on. And I will caution you, if you are the kind of person who needs a solid answer of what's going on, why things are happening, all those kinds of things, this is not going to be a book for you. This is not a book full of answers or explanations or figuring things out and like coming up with creative solutions for things. This is really just the story of survival and making it and struggling and not understanding. This is probably much more of a realistic, it's funny to say that with such an out there fantasy book, but this is probably a much more realistic example of like what would happen in this kind of situation. You're not going to figure a lot of things out. You're probably never going to have answers. You're going to just hold on to whatever little bit of hope that you can have. And so I do think that a lot of this book was really well done. I do think it maybe overstayed its welcome just a little bit. And there's not even that much that I think should have been pulled out of it. I think by the time we were getting towards the end of this story, I was a little tired of it and ready to be done. But once again, overall, this is one I would recommend to a lot of people. It fits in a couple of different genres. You could say it's sci-fi, you could say it's horror, you could say it's post-apocalyptic, you know, all those kinds of things. If you like a lot of those things, this is probably a decent one for you to go ahead and check out at some point. And this author actually has a couple other horror novels, and one of them I found out when I was looking him up is called The Rituals, and it's a random movie, a horror movie that I watched randomly on Netflix like 2 or 3 years ago. So that's just a fun random fact I found out about Adam Neville. And then the last book that I finished in the month of October, which technically as of the time of filming this, I have not finished yet because I'm trying to watch the Steelers not lose to the Giants today and ruin the entire rest of my week, which it's looking like they might do right now. But that is The Phoenix Keeper by S.A. McLean. This is my first Romantasy book, and I think this is going to probably end up getting a 3-star rating from me. I have enjoyed my time with it. It is very sweet. Like, it is so like warm and cozy and just heartwarming and all of these kinds of things that I guess I wasn't really expecting. When I think of romance, I think of the spice, I think is what people call it. And that's definitely not like a main component of this Romantasy here, but I have had a pretty good time with it. I have a lot of questions about like Romantasy and stuff in general, and if this is like a way outlier or if a lot of it is more like this, but overall, the setting is really fun. The characters are kind of quirky and silly and everything, but overall, and I will say some of it's pretty predictable. Like, this isn't going to have a bunch of twists and turns that you can't figure out. Pretty sure, even though I haven't finished this book yet, I know exactly what's going to happen at the end. We'll see if I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm going to be. But as my first entry into a book that is specifically marketed as Romantasy, because I think looking back on it now, and somebody mentioned this in a comment, you could maybe say that the Aurelian Cycle is Romantasy, but it was never marketed as that, and I think that that's not a fair tag to add to that series. So for this being like my first entry into it, I'm intrigued. This hasn't put me off from it. This doesn't make me feel like I have a wide understanding of that genre, but I think it was a decent place for me to start as somebody who's not super into it, that has a cool setting with like an actual plot going on, and it's not just about the romance. Obviously that's playing a decent sized part in here, but honestly we're much more worried about like the magical animals at the zoo. That's the setting of this story. And so overall I think I'm going to end up giving it a 3-star if the ending is different than what I think it's going to be, which like I said, I'm pretty sure I know exactly what's going to happen. Maybe it could bump up to a 4-star, but I'm pretty confident it's just going to be one of those good books that I've read this year, but not anything like special. And I'll be curious on if any of you have read it or heard of it, how different it is from a lot of the other Romantasy that is popular. It's honestly makes me want to try one of the really popular ones, as I kept calling it Fifth Wing in my Chatting with Nuts episode with Jimmy. I think it's Fourth Wing. Like, I kind of want to read that one now to see like how starkly different is like the biggest one out there. I know the Sarah J. Maas stuff is really popular, but I kind of want to see like, this is a trilogy, so it's not like a huge commitment. And I just want to see like how different, is this really an outlier, or is this what a lot of it's like? And so much Romantasy just gets like a bad rap for no real reason. And that is everything I read novels wise this month. And I will just say quickly, book of the month I think is pretty easy to tell. I have nothing but glowing things to say about it. That would be The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. I will quickly check in on my manga reading, and I don't think I read a single chapter of manga here in October. Just didn't really have any drive to, even though I'm in the middle of a bunch of series that I like and enjoy. I'm so streaky with it, and I have just been in a cold cold streak with manga, and I don't know why that is. It's just not something that's really been calling out to me. I will say I have kind of had the urge to go back and start watching anime again instead of reading the manga. I think some of the manga that I'm reading are just done much better in the anime form, and so I'm kind of debating on maybe going back to that. It's just so much more of a time commitment. I don't really watch a whole lot of TV to begin with, especially if I am having to listen to the sub. I guess if I do the dub, that's a little bit easier, but if I really have to sit there and read everything, that's just a hard time commitment for me to do, as I'm not trying to spend more time staring at screens than I already do. But speaking of like TVs, movies, video games, quickly, I'm watching the NFL like crazy. Always do this time of year. My Steelers are 5-2 right now. Like I said, hopefully they don't lose to the Giants tonight. I will be very upset because I don't think the Giants are a very good team. And this is a classic Mike Tomlin trap game where he loses a game we should absolutely win. But hopefully we can pull this one out here on Monday night. this is going to sound silly, but I have started to rewatch Reba, if you remember that show. I forget exactly what channels that was on back in the day, but I randomly decided, I saw it on Netflix, and I was like, you know what? This is one of those fun sitcoms that I can kind of have on in the background, not pay like all that much attention to, really just background noise, but you know, it's kind of funny, lighthearted and everything. And I remember enjoying that show when I was a lot younger, so I kind of want to watch it again through some more adult eyes and see if it holds up. First of all, it's an older show. I think it came out in like, what, 2002-ish, maybe? So I have slowly started to rewatch that. And then for, horror Halloween time, me and my girlfriend watched It Chapter 1 and 2. I think I probably prefer Chapter 1 over Chapter 2. I just had this problem, and my girlfriend did too, that Chapter 2, it felt like some of the horror stuff that they tried to build up and be scary was silly. And I don't know if part of that was, we were watching it in our living room and not in a theater where it's all dark and everything. Like, I don't know. I just felt like a lot of the horror elements, it just tried to be too silly, too funny, and the tension wasn't there. At least in the first one, I think it was a little bit more creepy. I never really felt like there was all that much horror in it. As an adaptation, I think it does a decent job. I think it's one of those ones where like it changes random things for random characters that really doesn't make like that much of a difference. And it's just a little strange. Like it's a change that I don't know why they felt like they needed to make it, why they needed to give a different character something else to do when they gave what that character is supposed to do to another character. So it's just one of those little things. Overall, I think it's pretty well done, but I'm trying to think of like a 7 out of 10, like it's fine. It's well done. It looks good. The spirit is there, but overall, I didn't think it was really anything special. I think a lot of people really like Chapter 1 and felt a little bit more like I felt about Chapter 2, but let me know if you have watched those down below in the comments. And then to close out today's video, I just want to do a self-published, doesn't even have to necessarily be self-published, but these two happen to be self-published authors that reached out to me, and I told them that I would gladly shout out their book. So we have Erik Goodwyn, and that is the Forgetting Darkness. And then we have June, I'm going to say Chevalier, and that is Gotterhaven, Hecatob's Prize. So those are two. I'll have some links to those down in the description and everything if you want to check those out. But definitely let me know about your month of October down below in the comments. I would love to hear about what you read, watched, played, all those kinds of things. And as always, I hope you have a good one.